My name is Daniel, 36M, and I live with my daughter, Emily, 16F, in a quiet town in South Dakota. Every weekend, she stays with her mother. She leaves Friday afternoon and comes back Sunday evening, so by the time I get home from work on Friday nights, she's usually already gone. But this particular Friday, as I pulled into the driveway, I glanced up at her bedroom window and noticed her light was still on. She must have forgotten to turn it off before leaving. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me, and immediately, I heard movement upstairs. "Oh, she's still home?" I muttered to myself. I walked up the stairs and knocked lightly on her door before pushing it open. "Your mom isn't picking you up this weekend?" I asked. She was sitting on her bed, hunched over her journal, not looking up. "No." "Great. I'll make dinner for us, and maybe we can watch a movie." There was a long, uncomfortable silence before she finally said, "Yes." I frowned. She seemed distant, off. Emily was usually chatty, always going on about her day. I pulled out my phone and texted her mom, asking if they had an argument that made her not want to go. Downstairs, I started making dinner. As I stirred the food, I noticed something odd. Emily's backpack and coat weren't in their usual spot by the door. We always hung our things up when we got home. Maybe she took them to her room? I brushed it off. No big deal. As I set the table, I turned to see Emily sitting on the couch, her back to me. I hadn't even heard her come down the stairs. She startled me, just sitting there, completely still. No phone, no TV on, just staring at nothing. Trying to shake the unease creeping up my spine, I turned back to the kitchen and called out, "Hey, can you pick a movie for us?" No answer. After a moment, I walked into the living room to check what she had picked, but the TV was still off. She was still sitting there, motionless. "Emily, you didn't hear me?" I asked. She didn't respond. Feeling unsettled, I grabbed the remote and picked a movie myself, The Conjuring. I figured a horror movie might lighten the mood, ironically enough. I plated our food and was about to sit down when my phone buzzed in the kitchen. "I'll be right back," I told her. It was a text from her mom. "What do you mean?" I picked Emily up from school. "We're grabbing dinner with her grandma right now." My entire body locked up. The blood drained from my face. I felt paralyzed. I forced myself to turn toward the living room, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Peeking around the corner, I saw it still there, sitting, staring forward. But it hadn't once looked at me, not once since I'd been home, like it was deliberately avoiding eye contact. I stepped back into the kitchen, gripping the counter. My heart slammed against my ribs. I needed my car keys. They were on the coffee table in the living room. I had to go back in there. Swallowing the panic clawing at my throat, I forced my feet to move. Act normal. Act casual. I walked in, pretending like nothing was wrong, but it was gone. The couch was empty. My stomach twisted. A voice came from upstairs. "Dad, I'm upstairs. I need your help." Sounded like her, but it wasn't her. The voice was twisted, stretched in a way that made my skin crawl. No. I snatched my keys off the table and bolted. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely jam the key into the ignition. My breath came in panicked gasps as I reversed down the driveway, tires screeching against the pavement. Something made me look up. It was in Emily's window, watching me, waving. His face was smooth, featureless. Couldn't breathe. I had never driven so fast in my life. I had just moved into my new apartment, a small, old place on the 4th floor of a rundown building. The rent was cheap, which should have been a red flag, but I was desperate. The landlord barely spoke, just handed me the keys and muttered something about not paying attention to the noises at night. first, everything was fine. The place was quiet, a little cold, but nothing unusual. Then the noises started. It began as faint shuffling sounds coming from the hallway outside my door. I assumed it was my neighbors, but the hall was always empty when I checked. Then, late one night, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A whisper right outside my door. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like someone was speaking directly to the wood. Low, raspy, insistent. I crept up to the peephole, heart hammering in my chest. But when I looked through, there was nothing. Just the dimly lit hallway stretching out in both directions. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was just tired. But the next night, it happened again. And this time, it was worse. The whispering came back, but now there was knocking. Slow, deliberate taps against the wood. I held my breath. Then came the sound of something being dragged across the floor outside my apartment, scraping along the old linoleum like heavy fabric or something worse. I texted the landlord, but he didn't reply. I barely slept, jumping at every creak, every sigh of the old building. By the third night, I was done. I had a bag packed, but before I could, the whispering returned. Only this time, it wasn't outside my door. It was inside. The voice came from the corner of my living room, a breathy, rasping sound that sent icy needles down my spine. I let you in. Now let me out. My vision blurred with fear. I turned, but the room was empty. The air was thick, heavy, pressing against my skin like something unseen was standing inches away. I ran. I didn't look back. I left everything behind and never returned. A week later, I finally got a response from the landlord. A single message. If it spoke to you, you left just in time.